Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We've got so much to do, whether it be looking back what happened against Kentucky on Saturday, what Georgia fans want to see more of from that. Obviously, the concerning situation with Richard LeCounte, now a part of a growing number of Georgia injuries, although the LeCounte thing is kind of in a category of its own right now. And then, of course, so much on Georgia-Florida and the magnitude of this game, what it means for Georgia and its pursuits of the goals for 2020, but also the long-term battle for supremacy in the SEC East. This is such a pivotal week for Georgia, both in the near term and the long term. We'll do everything we can to cover it. John Stinchcomb on the way today as a part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. We will just try to get everything out there that we can, and we're so glad to have you with us for it. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
There is so much to do today, so much that needs to be said, but it would be a huge mistake if I began the show by saying anything other than this. You know, driving back from Lexington on Saturday, as that kind of turned into night, I'm on back roads a lot, kind of going, from Tennessee, back towards my home. A lot of sort of dark back roads, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I'm driving by myself, and when you're driving, you're not supposed to obviously look at your phone, things like that. But I do start kind of noticing that a bunch of text messages are flying in there, and you hear about Richard LeCounte being involved in some version of an automobile accident, and I can't really find out more than that, right? Because I can't look at my phone while I'm driving, and I've got spotty cell service anyway, so pulling off the side of the road doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. So there's this moment in which I hear about the fact that LeCounte's been involved in an accident, but don't really know anything else beyond that. And when you're driving the car kind of in the middle of nowhere, it's dark, you're by yourself, your mind kind of does a lot of stuff to you anyway. And so this is like very, very intense, scary news. And in that moment, all I can do is just simply pray that this young man's going to be okay and that this is not as bad as it sounds like it initially could be. And thankfully, in the hours after that, you kind of learn that, yes, it was an accident. Yes, he is banged up, but it could have been worse than it was. And for me, that is just such an answered prayer. What a scary situation on Saturday. Obviously, it now becomes a football story again with LeCounte's injury and how that impacts Georgia for Florida. And trust me, we will get there before we're done here today. But just to begin with, just such a level of gratitude for me that the LeCounte story is about football, because initially when I first heard about this, like many of you did as well, it was initially pretty scary. So continued prayers for Richie and his family, and I'm just so thankful that it's an injury we're talking about here and not something that potentially could have been far worse than that. So I wanted to begin the show by saying that. Awkward transition now. There's something, I think, before you get into Georgia, Florida, which will obviously dominate our week here, I think there's something that kind of needs to be said. That there is a growing dissatisfaction among Georgia fans. And I predicted this a couple of weeks ago. It's coming true now. Where all of a sudden there's a sense of, kind of like you break it, you buy it when you go into a store. There's a sense that, Kirby Smart now owns the Georgia offense for better or for worse. And Dog fans still love Kirby, and Dog fans are still, pretty optimistic and kind of bullish on the long-term trajectory of this program. But there is a growing sense of frustration about why this team makes offense look so difficult in comparison to the very best teams in college football, and needing a day against Kentucky on Saturday to make some folks feel better about that after Georgia saw what true high-powered offense looks like in a loss to Alabama 2 weeks before that. The Kentucky game just didn't give it to you. It was kind of kicked around after the game. Was this an ugly win? For Georgia fans, almost certainly it was. It was a game in which Georgia did very little offensively, enough to win the game, but certainly not enough to impress most people. And you get the sense, whether it be from our DawgNation postgame show after the game or just the general social media interactions that I'm kind of forced to endure at times, there is just a little bit of restlessness about why for the last couple of years Georgia has made offense look so hard. So before we do anything else this week, I at least want to give fans who are just kind of down in the dumps about this, I at least want to give them their fair say by addressing all of this. And Kirby Smart took a lot of these questions head on in his press conference on Saturday, including a very direct question here of, do you think your offense is even any good or not? And Smart's answer, I don't know how it lands with a group of Georgia fans who are just getting more skeptical, seemingly, by the day about all this. But here is Kirby Smart after the game on Saturday.
Internally, do you believe you're limited offensively?
I do not. And I hope one day we get to show it. I hope we get an opportunity to, because we get to go against a pretty good defense every day. I see them. I see them pass pro, see them throw and catch the ball, see us run the ball, see us play action, see a lot of good things out of our offense. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to see them yet. And a lot of that today was due to a ground and pound ball control by them and a few unfortunate turnovers.
I mean, listen, here is the one thing that Georgia fans are saying to me kind of in huge numbers really now for quite some time. When Kirby Smart says, I do not think my offense is limited, I think the question a lot of Georgia fans are asking right now is, well, how can you not feel that way? How could you look at the same set of circumstances that we all look at and come to such a different conclusion? Because by and large, most Georgia fans now think the Georgia offense is limited. And maybe they blame Stetson Bennett for that more so than they blame Kirby Smart or whatever else. But one way or another, the conclusion that people draw is, the Georgia offense is now limited, but Smart says it's not. And a lot of UGA fans are left to wonder, are you watching the same football game on Saturdays that we're all watching? And it kind of reminds me, psychologists will tell you that the way that you evaluate yourself is very, very different than how you evaluate other people. You typically judge other people on their results, on the outcomes that they are able to produce, whereas people have a tendency to judge themselves on their intentions. That's why we're so much easier on ourselves than we are other people. Other people frustrate us. We have a tendency to forgive ourselves sometimes because we judge ourselves on our intentions. We know what we're trying to do, and therefore we know how close we're getting to what it was that we were trying to do. Other people, we're not sure of their intentions. All we see is their outcome and their results. Therefore, we have a tendency to judge them harshly. I think that's honestly what's going on with Kirby Smart here as well. He's judging himself and his team on the basis of the intention. He knows what the game plan is going into a day. He knows how closely they got to it. And then, therefore, he's a little maybe kinder about the Georgia offense with himself and his own performance than the average fan is. Because the fan looks at the results and says, these results simply are not good enough right now. And words that Smart uses on Saturday have a tendency to be a little frustrating here. He says, I hope one day we get a chance to show it, that we are a good offense. And I think a lot of Georgia fans look at that and say, well, why do you need a chance to show it? What are you waiting for? Why not go out there and dictate the pace of a game yourself? Why not go out there and kind of announce your presence early on? I mean, Alabama's not waiting for a chance to show that it's good offensively. They lose Tua Tagovailoa. They lose Henry Ruggs. They lose Jerry Jeudy, and yet they're just as dominant offense as they were a year ago, if not more so. Ohio State goes on the road Saturday against a highly ranked Penn State team. Have no problem moving the football at all. They're not waiting for a chance to show they're good offensively. They just go out there and dictate the pace themselves. Same thing with Clemson, even more so maybe because Trevor Lawrence got the coronavirus right now. He's not able to play, but that's not a lost opportunity for Clemson to show that it's good offensively. Defense had some issues against Boston College, but offensively with DJ Uiagalelei playing quarterback there, they had no problem whatsoever showing that they're a good offense. They're not waiting for their chance to do that. They go out and take every chance they get. And right now, Georgia is just not able to do that. So fans want to kind of complain about that, and I'm right there with you on that. However, the one thing that's going to make me a little bit different than a lot of Georgia fans here today is, while I acknowledge that the frustrations of the Georgia offense right now are all well-founded, the one thing I will tell you this week is that is less important to me than what's about to happen on Saturday against the Florida Gators. I'm not going to get lost in some intramural squabble about how to fix the Georgia offense when Georgia plays its most important game of the season coming up on Saturday. And through it all, Georgia is still favored in that game. And a lot of Georgia fans say, well, BA, how can that be? Did y'all see the stuff that Dan Mullen was doing on Saturday? Whether it's instigating a fight near the end of the half, going into the locker room, then coming back on the field like a professional wrestler. And I will show you some of this stuff on video. Coming back on the field and waving his hands and trying to get the crowd fired up. Then he shows up after the game like Darth Vader in his press conference. Dan Mullen acts like such a doofus sometimes. Do you really want your team, Georgia, to lose to that guy on Saturday? Are you really so mad right now about what you think Georgia's not doing offensively that you've lost sight of the fact that Georgia right now is facing a threat from someone who's a total clown, both in terms of how he acts during a game on Saturday, dressing up like Darth Vader after the game. Do you really want to lose to that guy on Saturday? I hope the answer to that is no. I hope that whatever frustration look at that, dressed like Darth Vader. After causing a brawl, and make no mistake about this, Mullen is the guy who caused that. You don't get the full-on fight in the middle of the field on Saturday if not for Dan Mullen running out to the middle of the field, losing total composure as a head coach. Then he shows up after the game dressed like Darth Vader. Honestly, what Mullen does of his own accord here is every bit as embarrassing as, remember when the shark photo came out and people thought it was Jim McElwain when it wasn't? McElwain was really embarrassed by that, but in that particular instance, he didn't actually do anything. In this case, Mullen, of his own volition, has dressed up like Darth Vader after his team has been off the practice field for a couple of weeks because of a coronavirus outbreak. Then there's a brawl that takes place during the game, and he's dressing up like a character for Halloween for a post-game press conference. I'm sorry, the stakes are high for Georgia. The long-term trajectory of the program is at stake against Florida on Saturday. A clown on the other sideline as a coach. It would be embarrassing to lose to Dan Mullen, and Georgia fans, and certainly the Georgia coaches and players, don't want to be embarrassed. That's why the game matters on Saturday. And by the way, for those of you who want to see Georgia fix its offensive problems, it's much easier to fix those from a position of strength after having beaten Florida again than it is from a position of weakness, having seen your program erode after having won 3 straight in this series. You don't want that to happen. So yeah, for Georgia fans who are frustrated about the offense, I'm right there with you. However, more than anything else, though, my attention, my focus this week is on seeing Georgia find a way to beat Florida again. Now, I've heard from a lot of it, and you say, well, B.A., you're living in a dream world if you think that's going to happen. You're living in a dream world if you think Georgia's going to beat Florida this season, even if they have beaten them the last 3 years. I think the people who are saying that are wrong. And over the course of the next couple of minutes, I want to try to explain why, but first, let me introduce the show and welcome everybody here. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just thank you so much for being here with us today, and a huge thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. You know, Pella Window and Door of Georgia can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. That's a big deal for homeowners because it keeps energy inside the house where it's supposed to be. Maybe last night you had the heat on. You don't want that stuff escaping out from, old, inefficient windows and doors. Well, Pella Window and Door of Georgia can take care of you on that. A lot of different ways for you to set up that initial consultation. You can do it through the magic of video teleconference. You can meet face-to-face and have one of the Pella experts explain all the installation options available to you. Also, great savings right now as well. Between now and November 12th, you can get 50% off qualifying installations or no payments, no interest for 12 months. Pella also offers great warranties and unparalleled service and expertise. Easy to get in touch with a couple different ways. Online, PellaBranch.com. That's PellaBranch.com. That's the website. Or give them a call in their Dunwoody showroom at 404-445-2979. That's 404-445-2979. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. It'll be John Stinchcomb here coming up in just a moment as part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Before that, let me go around the doghouse. Here today, assisted by AAA, and here's the thing that I kind of notice. And when you do something for a living, you notice things about the thing that you do that outsiders are just not going to be aware of. And here's the one thing doing this show for a living and really interacting with Georgia fans on a regular basis that I become aware of that if you didn't live as deep in this world as I do, you might not just be aware of. That for a lot of Georgia fans who comment on the things that are going on here, the only thing that exists is the emotion they feel in the present. Sometimes they have no memory of the past or no concept of the future, the idea they may one day feel differently than they do now. It's really amazing how this plays out. For a lot of Georgia fans, they are so frustrated by what they've seen from their team the last couple of weeks, lost Alabama, ugly win versus Kentucky, that they've almost forgotten how similar the feeling going into this year's Florida game is to the Florida game from a year ago. I've said on social media a couple of times that I think that Georgia will still win on Saturday, despite the struggles of the last couple of weeks. And Georgia fans are like, how could you possibly, at least some of them are, how could you possibly feel that way? How could you ever think this Georgia team could beat that Florida team? But y'all, and some of you can remember this, maybe some of you maybe struggle to do so, A year ago, we were all saying the exact same thing before Georgia played Florida. If you don't believe me on this, as a way of kind of giving us some context for what the rest of the week is going to be like, listen to Kirby Smart after last year's win versus Florida, acknowledging the negativity that had existed around the fan base going into Jacksonville a year ago. Here is Kirby.
They were fired up today, and there were some tough ebbs and flows in that game. You know, their fans got back in it after the score. Our fans got back in it, but that's what it is. It's a hell of a rivalry game, and just proud of the support that our fans provided for us, even if they didn't think Jake could throw the ball.
I'm proud of the support our fans provided for us, even if they didn't think Jake Fromm could throw the ball. Smart in the press conference acknowledging that there was a lot of negativity with the Georgia offense going into the game against Florida a year ago, and it was not unfounded. The Georgia offense had not been good. And in so many ways, the same thing is true this year. Statistically, it's actually kind of amazing just how true it all is. In fact, let me show this on the screen here for a moment. If you look at Georgia last year going into the Florida game, Georgia had played 5 Power 5 opponents. It had played 4 SEC games plus Notre Dame. This year, Georgia has now played 5 SEC-only games, so it's a fairly nice apples-to-apples comparison. Well, if you look at Georgia last year against its first 5 Power 5 opponents, it was averaging 26.8 points per game. This year for Georgia against 5 SEC opponents to start the season, the games ahead of Florida, Georgia's averaging 29.2 points per game. So for the Georgia fans who think all of a sudden this offense is worse than it was a year ago, compared to Power 5 opponents, Georgia's actually scoring slightly more points per game than it was last season. And if you compare the two quarterbacks for a moment, Jake Fromm and Stetson Bennett, the comparison also kind of continues again. Can I see this on the screen again just so I can kind of read from it here a little bit? Jake Fromm, who Georgia fans had kind of doubted going into last year's Florida game, 6.78 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Stetson Bennett, by comparison, 8.3 yards per attempt, 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So if you look at the positive side of this, Stetson's been actually better than Fromm on yards per attempt thus far this season and touchdowns when you compare Fromm to games against Power 5 opponents. The one thing, though, that Bennett has been worse at than Fromm, comparing the first 5 real games of the 2019 and 2020 season, is obviously Stetson Bennett has thrown more interceptions. Now, that matters, and that's a big deal. But the notion that somehow that the offensive situation for Georgia this year is far worse than it was last year, it's just not the case. It's almost the same, if not slightly better in some categories here for 2020. A lot of Georgia fans thought that Georgia team a year ago had no chance to beat Florida, and yet they went out there and they got that done. It's not inconceivable that the same thing could happen this upcoming year, but it's probably true that Georgia does need to avoid those interceptions. If you look at the last 2 seasons of Georgia beating Dan Mullen coach Florida teams, avoiding interceptions has been something that Georgia has done. In the last 2 games against Florida, Georgia's thrown no interceptions, so you've clearly got to be better in that regard, something that Stetson Bennett has just not done. He hasn't been very careful with the football as of late. Smart did come to his defense a little bit on Saturday. Here is more of that.
He made one poor decision, and we thought he should have checked the ball down, and he threw the ball deep and was really trying to throw it out of bounds and didn't get it out of bounds. So it's just a poor decision. It's a lack of experience and make good decision, but he also did some good things with the ball, and that's the most important thing for us. It's not necessarily getting back to what we were doing. It's give Kentucky some credit. They got a good defense. They got a good team. They always play good, hard, physical defense.
So let me wrap all this up. There's no doubt that Stetson Bennett right now is being too reckless with the football. A lot of Georgia fans want to see a different quarterback, and I'm not quite so sure that's not something that should at least be considered at the moment. I'll totally acknowledge that all the way around. But the Florida game this year for Georgia is no less winnable than it was last year. Georgia fans were down on the team going into Jacksonville a year ago, and yet Georgia still got it done because Florida's a deficient program led by a coach who dresses up like a Halloween character for post-game press conferences. That's still true right now. So for Georgia fans who think there's no chance that Georgia beats Florida on Saturday, frankly, I don't know what fact pattern you're paying attention to. This is a time to get your game face on, and the problems that Georgia has will linger beyond Saturday. But just be glad to know that your arch nemesis, your most important SEC opponent, what I believe is your biggest rival, just be glad to know they still provide plenty of vulnerabilities that give you a chance to win the game. It is Around the Doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA. You know, AAA is famous for its legendary roadside assistance. I love the peace of mind that gives me when I'm traveling like I was on Saturday to Lexington, Kentucky, but AAA also offers you great savings as well, like the AAA Savings Hack Pack. It's a combination of benefits worth over $1,000. including free career assistance, identity theft protection, up to 85% off prescriptions, and discount on food and essentials. It's a part of every AAA membership. So check out this website. You can find out a whole lot more. AAA.com/go savings. AAA.com/go savings. That'll get you in touch with a AAA, and you can learn much more about that. All right, so one thing we have not talked enough about yet is the injury situation for Georgia. That's huge going into Florida on Saturday, and it is not an insignificant concern. So let me begin that with John Stinchcomb now as we do a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. And it's good to have you with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update time with John Stinchcomb. We certainly appreciate him being a part of the program here today. And, John, there's obviously a lot to unpack here, whether it be what happened against Kentucky on Saturday, what's going to be happening as you move towards, Florida this upcoming week. And I want to begin with something I haven't really probably talked about enough as of yet. That's the injury situation. Typically speaking, I probably don't view injuries as a huge storyline in college football one way or another. I think that for the most part, we have a tendency to overrate the impact of injuries. And yet when you think about, Jordan Davis and Julian Rochester and, Quay Walker and I would say Monty Rice still banged up. Now the situation involving Richard LeCounte. At a certain point in time, injuries can pile up enough that it becomes a real big issue. How big of an issue do you think this is heading into Florida on Saturday?
Well, I think it's significant. I think you look at the number of players that are down. You just listed a number of guys that are counted on. Those are main rotation guys, especially on this defense. Considering the number of replacement parts that are going to be out there, I worry about, if nothing, just the conditioning of it. Some of these rotational players, Jalen Carter and Azir Stackhouse, just along the defensive line, or Major Burns in that back end, you're looking at guys that haven't had the reps. They haven't had to get conditioned to play 60 minutes, and all of a sudden, you're asking them, instead of offering a spell of your starters, to be the starter and come in and get rep after rep. That's a big change if you're not prepared just with the conditioning. It's a lot different than running sprints at the end of practice and going out there and playing 60 minutes. I mean, there's a major difference in the level of conditioning you have to have to be game ready for those situations. Is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, when Georgia has recruited as well as it has, I would say for the most part, individual injuries typically just aren't that big of a deal because there's a lot of depth. However, there is a small handful of players that for Georgia, I would say, man, trying to play without these guys, you're just going to really feel the impact. And as unfortunately bad luck would have it, all three of these guys, I would say, are a part of this right now. And it's kind of your up-the-middle guys. Your nose guard, Jordan Davis, he's one of Georgia's 2 or 3 most important players. Richard LeCounte, one of Georgia's 2 or 3 most important players. To the extent that Monty Rice is not fully healthy, that's that veteran presence as a linebacker, a guy that's good at stopping the run. If you told me, hey, be able to give you 3 or 4 names that you can protect and give Georgia its best chance of winning, I would want those guys I just mentioned to be healthier, maybe more so than almost anybody else on the team. As luck would have it, it's that issue up the middle that Georgia's facing on Saturday. And by the way, guys like Rice, Walker, who played in place of Rice, Richard LeCounte, those are also what I would assume are in some cases key guys to kind of help you keep your eye on Pitts, the great tight end for Florida. From that standpoint, it is a significant storyline.
Yes, I think the matchup against Pitts is going to be very important to this Georgia defense. And with Richard LeCounte, I would say that's the primary injury concern that's going to be most affected by that loss. That matchup is going to be huge just because Pitts is a problem for any defense. And when you have your experienced safety, who's arguably the matchup that you would want for Pitts, and you don't have him, that's going to be a challenge. I also think Monty Rice not being 100%, is it going to be Nakobe Dean? Is that the matchup that you're going to see most against Pitts? I mean, who's the guy that you're going to count on play in and play out to address it.
Let me step in here just for a moment. John, we're getting a little bit of a bad sell on you. Let me put you on hold and let Michael work with you. We may call you back and see if we can get a little bit better sell here. It's our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update with John Stinchcomb there. We'll get John back on the phone. Michael, why don't you just redial him up there, and we'll see if we can get a better signal on that. So we're obviously dealing with everything going on, getting ready for Georgia, Florida on Saturday. The injury situation is certainly a significant one. We'll let you hear more from Kirby Smart on that topic before we're done on today's show. And, it doesn't change the overall outlook for me. This is still a game that not only do I think Georgia can win, I believe that Georgia will win, even with its problems offensively, even with the injuries that are piling up defensively. I believe that's the case, but obviously I don't want to treat the sheer number of names that we're talking about here in any kind of insignificant way, because it is obviously pretty sizable. So we'll get John back here, and we'll give him a chance to kind of weigh in on with more on that. And I want to get John's thoughts on kind of what is going on with the Georgia offense and kind of what is left to be done on that front, and how he, as a former player, kind of sees the situation the way that, seems to be a divide right now in terms of Kirby's description of all of this compared to what Georgia fans are saying about all of that there as well. Robert Weaver, by the way, does not agree with me on Facebook. He says he's got a bad feeling about this game unless we play a quarterback that can win the game. So listen, there is very little I can do to make people feel better about that. All I can do is point out that the exact same thing was said before last year's game. And if you really want to go back to 2018, coming off the awful game against LSU, frankly, there were a lot of people who didn't think Georgia was going to win the game in 2018 either. I mean, it's just not – this is very, very similar to the last couple of years. Georgia is limited offensively right now, and Georgia's got some big problems at quarterback that may or may not be able to be rectified during the season. But, y'all, you're not watching Florida play in and play out as closely as you're watching Georgia. Trust me when I tell you that the vulnerabilities that Georgia has exploited against Florida the last couple of seasons, I believe still exist. Listen, maybe I'll be right, maybe I'll be wrong. It's my job, though, to be clear about my opinion. And clearly as I can state it, Florida continues to be, I believe, a good matchup for Georgia. And I'm not the least bit scared of the Gators on Saturday. And that is all you can say about that. Donald Wilson says Kirby can't seem to coach up the talent we have. Also can't learn from mistakes, he says. Yeah, I mean, when you look at some of the overall depth of the receiver position, you look at some of the the things that you would hope would get better for Georgia this year. There's still some work that needs to be done there in that regard. But we'll get back to your comments and do more of that a little bit later on. Let me bring back John Stinchcomb here as part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. And, John, I want to move to what has been a hot topic for fans. And I kind of started the show by talking about the divide here, where, Kirby Smart, at least publicly, is taking a very calm, measured approach to how he describes what's going on with the offense. For Georgia fans, though, many of them didn't see what they wanted to see on Saturday against Kentucky. They saw an offense that, to their eyes, sputtered coming off a game and a loss to Alabama, where Georgia fans got to see what true high-powered offense looks like in the comparison to the Alabama Crimson Tide. What do you make of what's going on right now and the very different moods that seem to exist between something approaching panic on the part of fans and something that still feels pretty calm and fairly measured on the part of Smart? What do you make of this at the moment?
Well, I think he's trying to come to the defense of his offense and instill a little confidence, because quite honestly, that performance was not what anyone was hoping for. You're hoping you have 2 weeks to prepare following a disappointing loss against Alabama, and you come out and you smoke folks. Now, the encouraging thing to me is that the run game looks to be what the fans and what we have been calling for. Let's be run heavy. We just don't have any of those breakout runs, those big play runs like most of the offenses that are able to put up some major points. We didn't see any of those. And then obviously what's been talked about most, the play at quarterback, hasn't been up to the level that we need it to be. And this Saturday was no different.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I have done my share of defending Stetson Bennett, because the truth is I thought he really played well against Auburn and Tennessee. And, I thought the second half of the Arkansas game, his contribution to Georgia actually saved what could have otherwise been a Georgia loss there in that game. But pretty clearly, whatever kind of got lost for him during the second half of the Alabama game It seemed to continue over into the Kentucky game on Saturday. There's just some problems that he's dealing with right now that, I understand Smart wanting to protect his confidence, but at a certain point it has to be acknowledged that Georgia needs more quarterback play than what it's getting on Saturday.
Yes, and I think if we're going to be realistic, our expectations need to be for Stetson to play better, because there have been zero indications coming from Athens and the coaching staff, Coach Smart in particular, saying that there's an open door for competition, or it could be DeJuan or JT Daniels. That's the only projections there have come from the outside of Butchmere and Athens. So I think what's a realistic is to say, golly, how can Stetson play better? Because they don't seem very interested in entertaining any kind of discussions about JT Daniels or DeJuan Mathis right now. You listen to the post-game commentary from Coach Smart, and again, he's emphasizing, I don't think he played all that bad, or it was another tip pass. Well, those are problems. Anytime you turn the ball over and you're not protecting the most important piece, which is the football, that's an issue. And we're not even talking about being able to create plays or hitting open receivers. What we're saying is, base bottom line stuff, fundamental football 101 is you can't turn the ball over, and 2 more interceptions for a grand total of 5 over the past 2 Saturdays. That's a real problem that hopefully gets addressed this week. There's no time left. Florida's that's a big time game, not just because of the rivalry, but the implications that it has and the importance of what it means to the objectives that you set at the beginning of the year. So if Stetson's the man, which is exactly what the coaching staff and the team is projecting out there, then we just need him to play better.
It is our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update with John Stinchcomb. By the way, if you love Marlowe's the way that I do, the way that John Stinchcomb does, one of the best ways for you to show that love is becoming a Marlowe's Tavern Insider yourself. You get a real big incentive for doing that. You're going to get $10 off $30 just for joining. Also, you get a special birthday offer there as well. It's a part of a real great benefit that go along with being a Marlowe's Tavern Insider. Marlowe'sTavern.com, the place to go, and you can find the tab for the Insider Club and sign up. Also, if you haven't gotten the Marlowe's Tavern app yet, that's also a good way just kind of stay up to date on what's going on at the tavern in your neighborhood, getting special offers and everything like that. It's just the best way to have the full Marlowe's experience by being a Marlowe's Tavern Insider. Get $10 off $30, big savings there. Some fun around your birthday, too. So check out Marlowe'sTavern.com and the Insider Club for a lot more on how you can be a Marlowe's Tavern Insider. All right, our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update rolls on with John Stinchcomb. Let me finish with this, John, if you don't mind. Looking at Florida on Saturday, understanding the injuries, acknowledging the struggles at quarterback, acknowledging the offensive struggles overall. Georgia's still, I think they opened yesterday as a 3.5-point favorite. I would say they're favored for a reason. I myself am trying to be somewhat measured and calm about this. Georgia fans were down on this team going into the Florida game a year ago. They found a way to get it done. My assumption is that Florida is still deficient enough with its defense. Florida's not a great team when it comes to running the football. Florida is a team that Georgia has found a way to handle now 3 years in a row. My assumption is that continues on Saturday. I'm not all that concerned about Georgia losing against Florida this week. It's certainly a losable game because Florida's a good team, but this is still a game I expect Georgia to win. Adding all of the stuff that goes together into this equation for you right now, how do you view the Florida game on Saturday?
Well, I like our chances. We just can't turn the ball over. You look at the game these past 2 weeks, and the major Achilles heel right now is the turnover. You address those, and quite honestly, Florida doesn't scare me. I think I've done a little film study of them in preparation of this week, and they take advantage of defenses when they're unorthodox and not disciplined. And I think that's Georgia's strength. You've seen some of the big plays that Florida's created, and it's mainly because of blown defense, blown coverages, wide open receivers. Obviously, Pitts is a problem. It doesn't matter whether you're covering him or not. I mean, that guy he's a difference maker. So he's an X factor that you have to have a really good game plan for. But overall, this matchup is one that I was anticipating. The injuries is a concern, but if you don't turn the ball over, you play the disciplined style football that this Georgia defense has produced for a year and a half. You have to be excited about this opportunity heading into Jacksonville.
Boy, that's a great way to say it. Not worried, not scared, excited. Excited about the opportunity that exists on Saturday. John, those are strong words from you. We appreciate you being here as part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. I'll look forward to speaking to you later on this week as part of our Dog Nation Happy Hour. Thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
I look forward to it. And, at the end of the day, it was another Georgia win, which is what matters most. And there's not going to be an asterisk on this game for an excuse for injuries against Florida. So we needed whoever is healthy and eligible to step up and play, and then we can all rejoice for yet another beatdown of them Gators. Looking forward to that on Saturday as well.
That's exactly right, John. Thanks for your time.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, listen, I think John said it exactly right. This isn't about being afraid or mad or whatever else. It's about being excited. This is what it's all about. Injuries, struggling on offense, everybody's got their problems. Figure it out, go out and try to find a way to win anyway. I mean, that's just what if you're Georgia, that's what you've got to do. And I think that John zeroed in on it. The key is Georgia's got to find a way to avoid the turnovers. Georgia has played turnover-free in this game the last 2 years, and that's part of the reason why Georgia was able to win. Obviously, this game does become more, losable, infinitely more losable, if all of a sudden Georgia has the turnover problems that it's had the last couple of weeks. The question here becomes, from a strategic standpoint, can you get the good of at least some, passing game with the risk, and by, mitigating the risk of the turnovers? Do you have to play another quarterback to get that? Can you get that from Stetson Bennett? I would not consider JT Daniels to be any consideration whatsoever on Saturday. I just don't simply think he's swooping in to save the day for whatever reason, likely related to his health. I just don't think that's happening. But how does Georgia avoid the turnovers, but also give itself a chance to make some passing plays? If you go back and look at last year's game, Georgia has great success on third down throwing the ball in that game, but on first and second down, Georgia did not do a lot. I mean, there's kind of a revisionist history about what Georgia did against Florida a year ago. For the most part, it sputtered on first and second down and then hit home runs on third down. Can Georgia strike big when it needs to a little bit against Florida? And as far as the Gators go, this is not a shtick. This is not a gimmick. Florida does not have my respect. Florida's going to have to earn that. Dan Mullen's going to have to earn that. Dan Mullen's been a media darling for a long time. But even back at Mississippi State, I mean, remember 2017? Do you remember when Mississippi State, that team came into Athens that day? Georgia was only a 3-point favorite, and some of you don't care about betting and point spreads, things like that. But think about this as an expectation. The expectation was in 2017, in Jake Fromm's first start against an SEC opponent, that Dan Mullen and Mississippi State and Todd Grantham was running that defense. They were going to come into Georgia and shock the world. It was going to be a big moment for the maroon version of the Bulldogs. Georgia beat them 37-3. Dan Mullen is not on Kirby Smart's radar at all. A win on Saturday would obviously change that. But until that happens, until it changes, I'm going to acknowledge what the history has been. Dan Mullen is not a coach capable of beating Kirby Smart. Injuries, struggles at quarterback, I don't think those factors are enough to change this game on Saturday. And all I can do is be clear with you about my opinion on that. Let's move on here to our SEC through here. Coming off the heels of the brawl on Saturday that I believe that Dan Mullen incited, there was a joint statement given by both Florida and Missouri. And here's one of those things where if you're Missouri, you're in a tough spot. And, obviously Florida fans, to be fair and balanced here for a moment, they would say the thing that incited the brawl was a late hit on quarterback Kyle Trask. There's no doubt at the end of the half there, the hit on Trask was late. We can't show you highlights and things like that, so I can't break down the highlight of this. But there's no doubt that the hit was late. I don't think it was a dirty play because I don't think it was that late. It was a late hit, should have been a flag, but not the kind of dirty play, not the kind of, way outside the boundaries of football here. I thought Dan Mullen's response to it all was way outside the boundaries. And then both Florida and Missouri kind of issue a joint statement together saying, this isn't what we want SEC football to be about, or whatever else. Frankly, I don't think Missouri should have signed a joint statement with Florida because I don't think you have a brawl in this game if it's not for Florida. and coming, as a string of events that included a lot of missed practice for Florida because of the coronavirus and some of the other stuff that's kind of gone on there. It's not been a good string of time here for the Gators. It has not been. And I thought that Dan Mullen absolutely made himself to be a clown in the game on Saturday, and you better believe that is all a backdrop for what's going to happen against Georgia on Saturday. And by the way, more suspensions could be coming. We know that a couple Florida Gators players will miss the first half of this game against Georgia, but there could be more as the SEC watches the film. Does the SEC have the guts to drop the hammer on Florida for its behavior, or maybe even some Missouri players too? Because don't forget this, Missouri's next game is also against Georgia. Does the SEC have the guts to kind of drop the hammer on this? I don't know if they will, but this was not a good scene on Saturday. And if I was Missouri, I would not have signed a joint statement with Florida on that. Let me rattle through a couple more SEC games. Told you this would happen. It did. Auburn getting back on track at home against LSU. And, this is the danger of, freshman quarterbacks. Everybody loved T.J. Finley against South Carolina the week before. He throws 2 picks in this game. Max Johnson comes in. He actually plays pretty well for LSU. But the LSU defense with Bo Pelini has an awful time against Auburn. Auburn's tough at home. And, this was one that I feel like you should have been able to see coming. Auburn's been obviously doubted big because of how they've played in some of the games this year, but they really loaded up on LSU on Saturday. They defend their turf at Jordan-Hare Stadium pretty well, and they did that to LSU on Saturday. Mike Leach shut out for the first time in his coaching career against Alabama on Saturday. Just another example of this Tide offensive machine. They just keep right on rolling and humming. Kirby Smart said he hopes he gets a chance to show what his team's about offensively. Alabama's not waiting for its chance. It's taking its chance. No Jalen Waddle, 41-0 over Mike Leach, and whatever remnant of hype existed for Leach after his first win of the season against LSU, certainly by now that's fully squashed and fully dismissed, as it should have been all along. A&M Arkansas, that was a pretty interesting game from a gambling standpoint. Arkansas slides right in and then gets a backdoor cover. Sam Pittman's team has been very good against the spread this year. You have to acknowledge that. But for A&M, it's another win, relatively comfortable. They move up now in the polls. They're at 7th, I think, in the AP poll right now. This is a team that has a very, very inside track on going 9-1 and potentially being a part of a college football playoff debate. Schedule is pretty easy for A&M the rest of the way. Let's follow that and see how it goes, and let's make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, we're going to turn our attention now back fully towards the Dogs, and let's deal with the injury situation coming off the Kentucky game. Smart used a very, very powerful word to describe that in the opening to his press conference on Saturday. Let me give you a brief taste.
One of those games that was tough, hard fought, and probably costly in a lot of ways in terms of some dinged up guys and injuries.
Costly indeed. It seems like Georgia's got its issues here on both sides of the ball for a moment. On defense, where Jordan Davis and Julian Rochester during the game, Lewis Seen during the game, Quay Walker during the game after stepping in place for Monty Rice, who'd been banged up prior to Alabama. Then Richard LeCount, the auto accident after the game, that's also going to have him pretty banged up here for a little while. Kirby says, listen, even with all of that, you still got to get ready to go to war with the guys you have. This is Kirby again.
I mean, don't shake your head at it. That's what you have other players for. They give us 85 scholarships. You got to use those. You got to get the next guy ready to go play. That's why we train those guys. They rep in practice. They practice every day in practice. They get their opportunity to play. I certainly don't know that all those guys were exactly ready for that kind of physicality. They better get ready because they're going to be playing in the SEC the rest of the way.
I'm really of two minds on this. On the one hand, Smart's exactly right, that you recruit this kind of depth for a reason so you can step in and you can have guys fill the gap in the void when players are injured. But there are certain, small number of players for Georgia that are more difficult to replace than others. I'm a baseball fan. In baseball, you talk about being strong up the middle defensively. You want a good catcher. You want a good shortstop. You want a good center fielder. The version of that in football is your nose guard, your middle linebacker, your safety. Well, in Georgia's case, it's Monty Rice, who's probably still not 100%, and Quay Walker, who's now injured. Jordan Davis in a sling during the game is an unpleasant visual, just given how important I think that Davis is. He arguably maybe Georgia's most important player of all right now, and he's got a sling on. And, there's rumblings about Julian Rochester being, pretty significantly injured right now. That's one of your veteran presences, to say nothing of Richard LeCount, who really never comes off the field. It certainly seems very, very likely, if not fully confirmed, that he's going to be injured and out for the Florida game on Saturday. That's not a good situation. Injuries won't be an excuse if Georgia were to lose, but the kinds of injuries that Georgia has will test the depth that this team has, and it's a real opportunity for Georgia to rise up and meet the challenge on Saturday. On the offensive side of the ball, Georgia went to Lexington without Kenny McIntosh and without George Pickens. And after the game against Kentucky, Kirby Smart also updated them as well.
They're both just dinged up, and we're hopeful that both of them will get back. They practiced during the week, and we thought they'd be able to go, and just weren't able to. I mean, they weren't going to be effective to go out and play, and so we took other guys. I want them to be able to go, and they want to be able to go. They worked really hard. They got a lot of rehab and a lot of time spent getting ready, and we're hopeful to get them back next week.
Listen, some of you don't want a silver lining for the Georgia offense. You kind of want to wallow in your frustration for the moment. But if you did want a silver lining for the Georgia offense, it would be this. The Kirby Smart has not shown a lot of fear about playing without key players offensively. You know, he held out James Cook against Tennessee. Was it Tennessee? Yeah, he held James Cook out against Tennessee in the event that he could get healthier to play against Alabama. Smart trusted his ability to win without him. In this game on Saturday, not pretty offensively, but assuming there was a decision to be made about George Pickens and a decision to be made about Kenny McIntosh, Smart still felt comfortable holding them out. So, listen, I can't make you feel way better about the Georgia offense, but Smart is at least confident enough in this group that he's willing to give players an extra week to rest, and that's at least got to be worth something. So, there are no words that describe how big this week is going to be for Georgia. And if you're upset about the Georgia offense, for a while you got to get over it. And if you're mad about this, mad about that, you got to get focused and get your game face on. Because as I said earlier, whatever issue it is that Georgia's trying to fix, it's far easier to fix that from a position of strength. Having beaten Florida again and having the cachet of once again being the top team in the SEC East. Far easier to do that than the alternative. You do not want to see this program regress. You do not want to see this program erode. And they lost to Florida, and that goofball wearing a Darth Vader costume in his post-game press conference, you better believe that would be erosion for the Georgia program. Georgia does not want to see that. They are still those lousy, stinking Gators. Gator Hater Updater, it's been a long time, 1,465 days since they've beaten Georgia. We think the number grows after Saturday. We'll see you tomorrow at DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down, your chance to weigh in on the subject matter from today's show. I'll remind you that heat came on for a lot of folks last night. You know, my kids sleeping upstairs, they certainly want the heat on this time of year. I have cold-natured children, even though I'm not particularly cold-natured. So they want that heat on, and for many of you, when you flip on that furnace for the first time, you're wondering, is my heating system going to make it through the winter that's on its way? Well, if you want the peace of mind that comes with that, R.S. Andrews can make you feel better about that. You can trust them for all your heating and your air conditioning, your plumbing, your electric needs, all of that. You can find them online at rsandrews.com. They will take good care of you. All right. So last week on the show, in this portion of our show, we said, I'll make a deal with the audience that if Stetson Bennett does not have a good game, and we define good game as 3 touchdowns, and Bennett did run for 1, but didn't get the 3, 9 yards per attempt. Bennett actually, believe it or not, Bennett actually achieved that mark. He was over 10 yards per attempt for the game. He only threw it 13 times, but he was 10-plus yards per attempt for the game. But we also said no batted passes, no interceptions. Bennett did get a ball deflected, turned into an interception, and then threw another pick. I said if that was the case, then I would dial down my defense of Stetson Bennett and be open to something different. And I'm going to be a man of my word on that. I'm going to let you guys have your say on all of that. Now, listen, for those of you who are like obsessed with this, my focus is still going to be on the Florida game, so I'm going to probably make you mad when it comes to that. I'm more worried about Florida right now than I am, whatever, intramural squabble you want to have about quarterbacks. But I'm going to be a man of my word on this, that I would dial down the defense of Bennett if those numbers were not good on Saturday, and they weren't. So to me, everything should be on the table. Everything should be open for discussion. And with that in mind, we will get in here and we will do a little bit of comments. Let me start on YouTube today, and then I'll go to a Facebook after that. And for the most part, we're going to try to be pretty quick on this so you can get on with your day. But let's see where it goes. Ripped 73.99, talking about what Pickens did a year ago as maybe below the elite level. I would say that there's two things that are true at once here. First of all, Pickens' season last year, it is true, does not compare very well with like what Clemson and Alabama receivers and, a lot of folks like that have done, the Judys and the Justin Rosses and those like high-level receivers. That's below that. You're absolutely right about that. But compared to typical Georgia receivers, Pickens was way above that level. It's been a long time since a Georgia receiver had a year as good as the one that Pickens had a year ago. I'm not telling you that's supposed to make you feel better, whatever else. It's just true that Pickens was below the elite level compared to other guys around the country, but far better than what the best Georgia receiver had been in quite some time. So you have to do both those things at the same time. William Gray says, do you think Mullen should be suspended for his actions? I think so. I don't think the SEC's got the guts to do anything like this before the biggest game of the year, but Dan Mullen made the situation worse on Saturday. You do not have that brawl if not for Dan Mullen. He lost his cool. And I think that he had to me, it was kind of a sugar-free version of the Mark Richt celebration in 2007. Listen, I'll be very honest with you. I liked the 2007 celebration after the first no Sean Marino touchdown when it happened. In retrospect, it was not a good idea. And I think that Richt probably came to know that. And I think the SEC probably was pretty upset with him about doing that. This was sort of a sugar-free version of that. I think that in the aftermath of the coronavirus and the bad defense and everything else, I think that Dan Mullen was trying to create a rally point for his team, and I think that he was willing to create chaos on the field as a way of doing that. And so, yeah, I do think a suspension would be a justifiable punishment for that. I thought that Mullen was very much in the wrong, and he's actually lucky that he didn't set off a chain reaction of events that could have made things far worse. This was conduct unbecoming of an SEC coach. But ahead of the biggest game of the year for Florida, the SEC simply doesn't have the guts to suspend him. They're just not going to do it. And, for as far as additional player suspensions, my guess is the SEC actually doesn't watch the video very closely. If Florida's playing Vanderbilt on Saturday, my guess is the SEC acts very differently than they will knowing that Florida plays Georgia. I just don't think the SEC wants to interfere in this game very much, one way or another. But it would be absolutely justifiable. Either you suspend Mullen, what might be a more just punishment is to suspend all the guys who throw punches because of what Dan Mullen incited. That's actually a bigger punishment for Florida, but I don't think the SEC's got the guts to do it. Kevin Mills says, with this offense, as long as Bennett is quarterback, we will do just enough to make it to the big game and then get our butt kicked. That may very well be true. I mean, honestly, it just may be true that Georgia is good enough to win this game again on Saturday. They did so a year ago with a struggling quarterback, but they weren't truly good enough to beat one of the best teams in the country. They got blown out by LSU. It could very well be true that this Georgia team is exactly like that Georgia team, because the one thing that hopefully you take from today's show is that the problems of Bennett right now aren't unique just to this year. He's throwing slightly more interceptions than Fromm did a season ago at this same point, but in terms of touchdowns thrown and passes completed, he's actually doing a little bit better. That Bennett's not worse than Jake Fromm last season. He's just, been a little, careless with the football. But ultimately, the 2019 and the 2020 stories for Georgia are actually very similar. Georgia's offense does not have the passing firepower to beat or be one of the elite teams in the country. I just think that's just obviously true right now. But you can still beat Florida. Mark Brantley says, my problem isn't the offense, BA. It's the pattern of a terrible offense due to Kirby not being flexible enough to see if someone can do better. 5 picks isn't safe. He says 5 picks isn't being safe taking care of the ball. Mathis could be better. Yeah, so this is exactly the kind of comment that I said I was going to just let stand on its own if Bennett didn't play well. I think that for a lot of Georgia fans, the overwhelming curiosity exists of, well, could someone do worse than what Bennett was doing at times on Saturday? And I just think that, I'm just going to be a man of my word. Obviously, I'm tempted to say you should probably pay attention to the fact that Kirby Smart's so steadfast against doing this that maybe it's stubbornness, maybe it's not, but the results right now are just not good enough. So this is me keeping my word and saying, for those of you who want to consider a quarterback change, I understand why you would. Stephen Bozeman says last year we didn't have these injuries. That's exactly right. That's true. Makes this game more challenging. Not so much for me that it's going to change my mind on the game, but I will acknowledge it makes it far more difficult. Stephen, you're right about that. Steve Self says if Georgia wins, you can thank the defense. I think that's true. As I've said before, I think defense matters less in games when you're playing a team like Alabama because it becomes about keeping pace with the explosive offense the other team has. Explosive offense just has a statistical advantage over stingy defense. But in a game like this, Florida's weak on its lines of scrimmage. Florida doesn't run the football. Dan Mullen made no apology last year for not even trying to run the football against Georgia. And, Todd Grantham runs a style of defense that has been easily exploitable now by limited Georgia offenses for a couple of years. So this is a game where Georgia can still use what it has going for it. Florida's not in. This is the reason why I know that Florida's not a legitimate national championship contender, because Georgia can do what it does well and still, for the most part, have a certainty of winning this game. Whereas if it's an Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, teams right now that are, I believe, better than Georgia, LSU from a year ago, Georgia can't go in those games, use what it does well to dictate the pace of those games. That's the line of demarcation that separates a true contender from someone who's just merely good. And the bottom half of the top 10, the top half of the top 10 have never had a bigger chasm separating them, and Florida's more part of that bottom half of the top 10. They may be better than almost every team in the country, but they're not playing with the Alabamas, the Clemsons of the world. They're just not doing it. Tyrone Franklin says Daniels isn't physically ready. He's dressed to provide another quarterback for the opposition to prepare for. Yeah, that may be true. I mean, listen, I think in some cases there's if you think Daniels eventually can be your quarterback, there's some value in traveling with him and letting him be on the sideline and having his presence. I'm sure Kirby Smart loves the idea of giving opposing teams something to think about. But I just don't believe that Daniels has ever been healthy at Georgia. And in addition to not being healthy enough to play a game, I think he's been unhealthy enough that his preparation during practice has also been impeded as well. I keep using the Rick Pitino phrase, but I just don't believe that JT Daniels is walking through that door. Maybe if Georgia can earn the right for an Alabama rematch, maybe December becomes long enough where it's at least a consideration. But as I said, even at that point in time, you're talking about someone who's missed what I have to assume is the kind of practice he's been practicing, but the kind of practice that truly gets you ready to succeed. My assumption is he's been hurt enough that he hasn't been getting some of that. Wesley Allen says, what's going on with Mathis? How did he get the starting position only to lose it after one pick? As I said before, I would allow these kinds of questions to be asked. What is going on with Mathis that he had such a short leash in comparison to what what Bennett has had here the last game and a half? It's a fair question. I think it is a fair question. Chase Smith on the subject of DJ Daniel. He says he's been missing for a few weeks now, too. Yeah, DJ's been pretty banged up. He was going through warm-ups on Saturday, but I don't believe he ever played. And maybe y'all can correct me on that, but I don't think Daniel ever played. Keith Finley says in order to run the ball, you have to have a passing threat. That's the way that college football is now. Georgia ran the ball okay on Saturday, but in most of your big games, it is the pass that sets up the run more so than the run that sets up the pass. The reason why is that you just simply can't afford, the old chopping wood mantra that Kirby Smart made famous. When you're playing lesser opponents, that's fine. But when you're playing a truly explosive offense, you can't afford the risk of, hey, if I'm chopping wood, that means the running game takes a while to start working. I have to wear down my opponent for it to start working. In the trade back and forth of possessions, when you're facing a truly explosive offense, you just build yourself too big of a deficit. The NFL's become about that. We got a mess up here on the Michael. We got a mess up here. So let's just do this. It's late enough. Let's just go ahead and wrap up. If you can hear me, I don't know if you can. We're going to go ahead and wrap up for today. Thanks for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews cool down. Sorry about this. We'll take more of your comments tomorrow, and we will see you then. Have a great day, everybody. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door.